was a pretty average, ordinary teenage boy. Played a lot of sports. I really focused on playing soccer, and that was kind of my jam. That was what I did. So I played soccer, and I was on the powerlifting team, and just very athletic, very outgoing. Lots of friends, lots of different friend groups. So I had a really great high school experience. I moved out of my parents' home when I was 18, and I was living with some friends. And my progression into this world of just partying, this lifestyle, it increased, and it was increasing exponentially. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was driving from this barn that we were at, and I drove back to my apartment, the place that I was living. And while I was driving home, I started to get this tremendous amount of anxiety, and to the degree that I had to pull the car over, and I was kind of hyperventilating, and I just had this feeling that I needed to absolutely stop the things that I was doing. I felt like my life was going to end if I didn't stop going down this path. And it was so impactful that as soon as I got back to my apartment, I laid in my bed and I couldn't go to sleep. I just laid there, and I had this thought come into my head: you need to call your uncle. My uncle was a big farmer up in Idaho who had offered me in years past opportunities to go and work on his farm. And I felt at this time like that's something that I needed to do. If I was going to be able to quit living the lifestyle that I was living, that was something that I absolutely needed to do. I needed to go up to Idaho and farm and get away from things. So I did that. And fast forward about 1.5 years, I was ready to serve a mission, a full-time mission. So while I was there, I reconsidered the things that my parents had taught me when I was young, and I knew that that was a path that I needed to follow. And so I prepared myself for a mission, and I went. I was called to Porto, Portugal, and in the early spring of 2001, I left for Portugal. And within about 8 weeks of being in Portugal, I was hit by a bus and subsequently returned to the United States to receive reconstructive surgery on my back. That reconstructive surgery started with I guess as I went and saw the neurosurgeon, he prescribed a high-powered painkiller to kind of help me out before I had the surgery, which was 3 months away from that first initial visit with him, and those painkillers continued post-surgery. The painkillers were a crutch for me, and so I can look back and think that the painkillers didn't really help very much with the pain that I was going through, but what they did do was give me an excuse to check out of the emotional pain and some of the psychological issues that I was going through at the time. So when I finished surgery and finished my physical therapy post-surgery, and the doctor told me that I was going to have that prescription, that I didn't need the prescription anymore, I freaked out a little bit. The doctor had taken that prescription away and said that I didn't need it. I felt like I didn't need it for my physical body, but my psychological self, my emotional self, needed those drugs, needed those painkillers. So I reverted back to an old method of thinking and mode of operation. I went back to this person who knew how to find drugs and ran in circles with people who smoked weed and drank alcohol and did prescription drugs, and I found those people, and I found the next leg of my journey, which was this hidden life. I started living this duplicitous life. On the one hand, I was preparing to get married in the LDS temple, and on the other hand, I was buying prescription drugs off the street. I totally rationalized it, justified it. It was something that I needed. I validated it because I was injured and because I'd been through everything I'd been through, and I could totally feel comfortable with that. And that was the start to a lifestyle that was a downhill spiral. I mean, the lies that I had to tell to keep this duplicitous life, they got out of control really quickly. So fast forward a couple years, and my addiction to painkillers becomes an addiction to heroin, and the addiction to heroin really transforms into an addiction to IV drug use. And so really anything that I could figure out how to put into a needle, a level of insanity that as a young individual and as a missionary serving in Portugal that I never dreamed that I would experience. But that's what happened. And that lifestyle, that intravenous drug use lifestyle, crippled me to being able to function as a productive member of society. I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't keep any relationships. My marriage in 2002 to my wife dissolved, and we were divorced by 2006. And my criminal activity increased and was increasing exponentially. Anything that I had to do in order to get money to buy drugs, I did. And that started with petty theft and stealing from family members and from neighbors, and that just escalated into stealing cars. And I found that if I could steal one car, then that would keep me in drugs for several weeks. And so that kind of turned into the thing that I would do. I would kind of scout out where I was going to, make my next move, and I would make that move, and I'd sell the car, and I'd get drugs, and I'd get money, and that would keep me going for a little while. And this behavior obviously came to an end, and it ended with jail stays, and jail stays turned into outpatient drug programs and inpatient drug programs, and a laundry list of criminal convictions. And in 2010, at the end of 2010, I was arrested, and I knew that arrest, that there was nowhere else for me to go but the Utah State Prison. And that's where I booked into on February 4th of 2011. Booking into the Utah State Prison was it was a life-transforming experience. Being booked into county jails became almost like, it was really common behavior for me. It wasn't something that freaked me out to any degree. And I felt like going to the Utah State Prison was going to be just a kind of a trumped up version of being booked into a county jail. So as you drive into those, through those gates at the Utah State Prison, you drive through several of them before they let you out of the bus. And as I stepped off that bus and started taking that walk down into the oldest part of the prison, right in the middle of the prison, the heart of the prison, it was something that I'll never forget. It's a condemned building, and it was a dark walk because they walk you down into the basement. It's not bright and shiny like most of the county jail facilities that you go into in booking. And as I walked down these stairs, and it got darker and it got mustier, and I felt like it was a place that I didn't want to be. And that was actually different for me. As I booked into county jails over and over again, there was almost a relief oh, I don't have to be on the street anymore. I don't have to go through, all of this headache of trying to get money and do things to get money, and then going through the process of getting drugs, and I could take a break from those things, but this was not a break for me. And going into the first cell, that you go into, they call it hotel, and hotel is I found out later that the reason that they call it that is because your stay there is very short. It's an in and out time. It's a time to go and get your pre-classification stuff done. So you sit in a cell, and you're sitting there with all the other guys who are booking into the prison on that day, and one by one you're taken out, and you're given your property box, you're given your all the stuff that you're going to start your prison stay with, you're given your clothing, you have your blood drawn, they do a cavity search, you do all of those things that make you part of now the state's property. So as I'm sitting there in a hotel, sitting there with these 35 other guys, feeling this anxiety, feeling these really powerful thoughts that I don't want to be in this place, I had an incredible experience, and it's one that I'll forever look back on as being it was a horrible place to be in, but it was a blessing in my life, and I feel just so grateful for this perfect storm that happened, this dark cell, this cold time, the 35 other guys that are there that are being vulgar and abusive with one another, and the sounds and everything just came together for this experience to happen. I'm sitting there and I'm shackled. I'm cuffed at the waist, so I got a waist chain on, and my handcuffs are hooked onto my waist chain, and my shackles are locked into a ring that is hooked to this steel bench that I'm sitting on, and so I physically can't move at all, but I have this moment where I literally am outside of myself and looking at myself from outside and just seeing the situation as a whole, seeing myself sitting there on this bench with 35 other guys and just fitting perfectly in with those individuals. Anybody watching this as a movie could not have picked me out as anybody different than anybody else in that room. I fit the bill. I fit the part. I was completely emaciated at this point. I was covered in needle marks, abscesses on my arms. I couldn't move my joints very well. I was so malnourished. I weighed I know exactly what I weighed. I weighed 138 pounds when I booked into the prison. And so I really fit as a criminal drug addict, being in the place that he needs to be. But in my heart, I didn't feel like I belonged there. And that was an eye-opening experience. It was a paradigm shift for me. In that moment, I had been this junkie. I had been this drug addict, this criminal. I had really identified with who I had become, but standing outside of myself, feeling what I felt, and standing outside of myself and looking in, I had these thoughts. These thoughts started these thoughts of dissonance, of knowing I belonged there, but really not feeling like I belonged there. Knowing that I had chosen my way into the situation that I was in, and then in the very same moment having this just illuminating and almost exciting thought of, yeah, you did choose your way in, but you can also choose your way out. And for me, in that moment, everything changed. In that moment, I decided from day one, from that very first day that I was in there, that I knew well enough that I had chosen my way into that position to also know that I could choose my way out. That this was a start over for me, that it was an opportunity for me. And that was a real blessing. and they make a determination that I'm going to spend beyond 3 years at the Utah State Prison. How do I move past the feelings that I'm not going to be able to see my daughter grow up? She's 5 when I went to prison, and if I'm being really honest, the years up until I went to prison, I wasn't a very good dad. I wasn't around. I was doing all those things, making all those choices that got me into prison in the first place. Even in the worst part of my addiction, there was this desire to be that good dad, and this thought that I would when I decided to clean up, because this was always going to be the last time that I did this, and then I was going to get clean. When I went to jail, I was going to get clean. When I went to rehab, I was going to get clean, and then I was going to be a good dad. And so these thoughts this day were a little bit fatalistic, because I recognized that there were multiple years that I was going to be out of her life. And the thought of her being able to remember me, those kind of thoughts almost seemed impossible to me. That she's 5, she's going to be beyond 8 years old, 3 years goes by, and she's going to totally forget about me. And I had the luxury at the time of having my own cell. And so I went back into my cell and sat on my bunk and just put my head in my hands, and I just started to sob. And I just started to sob uncontrollably. I open my eyes and I look down and I see my property box. And just to give you an idea, the property box is, it's really just a plastic Tupperware. It's a clear plastic Tupperware. It doesn't even have a lid on it. And you just slide them under your bunk, and this is where all your stuff goes. So I look down in the box and I see just a couple of things. I see a piece of paper and I see a pencil. And I grab those two things out and I go to work on an activity that became almost a recurring activity throughout my prison stay. And it developed into something that I still continue to do this day. But I wrote down at the top of the page, if you could do anything with your life, what would you do? That was an absolutely pivotal moment for my time incarcerated. Everything started to change after that day, because as I wrote down the things that I really wanted to become, it was like me becoming a kid again and talking about my dreams. This is what I want to do when I grow up. And to do that was absolutely empowering. And it's a process of visualization that I still use today. I learned how to visualize. I learned how to take a childlike imagination and make those thoughts and feelings real. I learned what it takes to do that. I learned that it takes belief, and I learned that it takes acting on those beliefs, and I learned that it takes never giving up on that vision. The process of change, the process of becoming something new has been incredible, and it's a journey that's ongoing. It's one that requires daily visualization, and it's one that I love. Where my jacket years ago said exactly what I was and claimed me as my identity, it doesn't anymore. Today I get to claim a completely new identity. Today I'm a creator. Today I'm a structural therapist. Today I'm a son. Today I'm an advocate. For those who have made really crappy decisions. I'm an advocate for change. I'm an absolute lover of truth. And I'm an absolutely devoted father. I'm a son. I'm a trustworthy
loyal, and courageous brother. I'm a fighter, and I'm somebody who, beyond being a fighter, I'm somebody who teaches that as a principle for life. That's what it takes for all of us, and that regardless of mistakes we might think we've made, that we're not defined by them, that we can actually be created through them. And I love that. I'm so grateful for that knowledge of who I am.